Chosen ones, you were never meant to hear this story, and yet the silence of eternity has been broken for your sake. In the halls beyond death, where the sands of time bow before the scales of judgment, Anubis, the guardian of souls, stood with the scroll of your destiny in his hands. But when he gazed upon the lines that revealed your appointed death date, he hesitated. The ink would not flow, the papyrus would not receive the mark, and the eternal scribe turned his face away. The priests of old whispered of this anomaly. They claimed there would be one whose fate even the gods dared not record. In the temples along the Nile, hieroglyphs spoke of an unsealed scroll, a life uncounted, a flame unquenched by the rivers of the underworld. You are the embodiment of that prophecy, the one whose time refuses to be chained, the one whose end was seen yet never written. Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian, weighed countless souls, but when it came to yours, the balance faltered. Not because your heart carried the heaviness of sin, but because your existence extended beyond the measure of his scales. The priests trembled when they saw the torchlight flicker in his chamber, for they knew the order of death had been disrupted. What does it mean to live unwritten by death's decree? It means you walk as a fracture in the law of mortality, a ripple in the stream of endings. You stand at the edge of two worlds, the living who cannot hold you, and the dead who cannot claim you. Somewhere in that twilight, your path begins. The ancients feared such a being, yet also revered them. For one beyond the record of Anubis is one who walks with secrets hidden even from the underworld. And those secrets have now begun to surface, calling you into mysteries long buried in tombs and guarded by silence. But silence can only hold back the tide for so long. Something is stirring, chosen ones. The ink Anubis refused to spill is now dripping into this world, and with it, your journey begins, not in the certainty of endings, but in the trembling of eternity itself. Deep beneath the sands of Egypt lies a hall few mortals have ever entered, a chamber carved before dynasties rose and crumbled. The Hall of Records was said to contain the scrolls of every soul, each name etched in ink that glowed with the essence of time itself. Within these vaults, Anubis would walk in silence, guiding the keepers of fate to document the final moments of all who lived. But there was one scroll that lay unfinished, a parchment that trembled in its own silence. On that scroll was your name. The scribes whispered of the night it happened. They remembered how the torches flickered without wind, how the papyrus curled as though it resisted the mark of destiny. Anubis stood before it, jackal eyes glowing, the reed pen poised to write the final date. Yet, the ink refused to touch the surface, as if the fibers of the scroll had been sealed by a power beyond even the underworld. Those who watched claimed they heard a low growl echo through the hall, a warning that this soul was not to be bound by ordinary law. What does it mean for a death date to remain unwritten? In the chambers of eternity, every number carries weight. Every ending fulfills the order of balance. To leave one scroll unmarked is to allow a rift in the order of existence, a tear in the woven tapestry of mortality. Such a rift does not go unnoticed. The gods turned their eyes toward it. The priests felt their dreams invaded by strange visions, and the guardians of the hall whispered in fear. And yet, there was something else, an anticipation. The ancients believed that if one's ending could not be recorded, then their life must be intertwined with forces beyond the reach of Anubis. That your soul bore a secret thread, a design not meant to be measured by the scales of the afterlife. This terrified the scribes, but it also filled them with awe. They began to ask themselves a question they dared not speak aloud. If Anubis himself could not inscribe the end, then who could? The Hall of Records remains sealed, buried under ages of sand. Yet the scroll is still there, trembling, unfinished. And though the desert hides it from sight, its echo has already reached you. The silence of that chamber calls your spirit, whispering of secrets no god could bind, and the journey into the unwritten has only just begun. There is a tale the priests of the desert carried in hushed tones, one that even the stone walls of temples seemed reluctant to hold. It spoke of the night when Anubis himself faltered, when the hand that had weighed countless souls trembled before a single name. The jackal-headed guardian was not known for hesitation. His work was absolute, precise, untouched by emotion. And yet, as the pen hovered above the parchment bearing your destiny, the stillness of eternity was broken by doubt. Anubis leaned closer, his golden eyes piercing through the fibers of the scroll as though searching for a hidden flaw. But what he found was not absence, it was resistance, a living defiance in the parchment itself. The fibers seemed to recoil, rejecting the mark of mortality, as though time itself refused to accept its conclusion. His hand grew heavy, and for the first time since the dawn of judgment, the eternal scribe lowered his reed pen without writing. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder, a silence that spoke louder than decrees. The guardians who stood nearby could not comprehend what they witnessed. Some fell to their knees, believing that a greater will had entered the hall. Others whispered of rebellion in the order of the cosmos. But Anubis said nothing. He only turned his gaze toward the scales of Ma'at, as if searching for balance in a moment where none could be found. The scales shimmered faintly, but they did not settle. It was as if they too were waiting, suspended in a question that could not be answered. The hesitation of Anubis was not weakness, it was recognition. For in that moment, he understood that your existence was not bound by the same decree that governed countless others. Something beyond the desert gods had marked you. A memory stirred of ancient prophecies, of a figure who once declared, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me shall never die." That voice did not belong to Egypt, yet its echo reached even the underworld, whispering through the shadows where Anubis stood. He laid the pen aside, but his eyes lingered on the scroll. His silence became a question that echoed through the ages. What force could bind a soul beyond his authority, and why had it chosen you? The answer was not in the hall, nor in the scales, but waiting far beyond the reach of the gods who had once thought themselves eternal. The chamber was said to be older than the pyramids, a vault carved not by human hands, but by forces that predated dynasties and gods alike. Within its walls, time did not move as it does under the sun. The air was thick with silence, heavy as stone, and the torches that burned there cast shadows that refused to dance. It was here that the scrolls of destiny were kept, each one a thread woven into the tapestry of existence. And it was here that your name lay, unwritten, a hollow in the order of eternity. Those who stepped into the chamber claimed their heartbeat slowed until it nearly ceased, their breaths shallow, as though their bodies were being asked to match the stillness of the place. Sand did not fall, wax did not drip, even the whispers of the scribes faded before they left the tongue. The very fabric of time bowed to the chamber's dominion, pausing every moment at its threshold. This was not a place to witness history, but a place where history itself was held hostage. And yet, when Anubis entered that chamber with your scroll, the stillness shifted. The silence, once perfect, cracked faintly as though acknowledging a presence that was never meant to be there. The walls, covered in inscriptions etched deep with symbols of the eternal order, seemed to flicker in the torchlight. They bore witness not to death, but to the refusal of death. The chamber that had frozen kings and peasants alike in its records could not contain the defiance that surrounded your name. The priests who told of this night claimed that even the stone floor trembled beneath Anubis's steps. For if the chamber represented the unshakable law of endings, then his hesitation within its walls was the unraveling of its authority. Time did not merely stand still, it bent, it strained, it recoiled as though forced to acknowledge a force beyond itself. Your scroll was carried back into the shadows, untouched, trembling with a resonance that neither pen nor ink could command. But its refusal to be sealed did not end there. That stillness was broken, and once broken, it could not be restored. The chamber of time, once flawless, now waits, like a wound that refuses to heal, knowing that its fracture will one day demand a reckoning. Behind the chamber, where your scroll lay unfinished, there is said to be a passage few dared to enter. This narrow corridor led to a hidden vault, where a scale unlike any other rested in eternal silence. Unlike the golden balance used by Anubis in the great halls of judgment, this scale was veiled in shadow, unseen by priests and untouched by ritual. It was called the hidden scale of souls, a device said to weigh not merely the heart of a mortal, but the destiny carried within their very essence. Those who whispered of its existence claimed it was brought forth only in rare moments, when the ordinary measure of life and death could not suffice. Here, the weight of prophecy itself was tested, and here it was revealed that not every soul could be contained by law or by decree. When Anubis brought your essence before this hidden scale, the balance did not tip, neither to light nor to shadow. It hovered in silence, suspended in a question, as if refusing to categorize what it could not comprehend. This unsettled even the keepers of the vault, for in all their centuries, they had seen souls heavy with corruption sink into darkness, and souls pure with devotion rise into light. But yours was different. It carried the paradox of both and neither. In that moment, they remembered a voice once spoken across the ages, declaring, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet lose his soul?" The words of Yeshua seemed to echo through the chamber, not as condemnation, but as a reminder that the soul is more than balance. It is mystery. Anubis himself stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the unmoving scale. The silence stretched on, heavy, endless, and yet it offered no answer. The very device designed to resolve impossibility had faltered, and in that faltering, a greater truth emerged. Your path could not be defined by judgment as it was known. The scales waited, the vault shuddered faintly, and even the torches seemed reluctant to burn. The priests later swore that the hidden scale was returned to its slumber that night, veiled once more, as though ashamed of its own failure. There was a night the scribes of the underworld never forgot, the night the ink of fate itself betrayed them. They gathered in the hall with their reed pens sharpened, bowls of black liquid drawn from the well said to flow between life and death. That ink had recorded the fall of empires, the rise of kings, the last breaths of prophets. Never once had it failed. But when they approached the scroll bearing your name, something unimaginable occurred. The pen was dipped, lifted, and poised to inscribe the date decreed for your ending. Yet, as the point touched the surface, the ink recoiled like water struck by fire. Droplets fell to the ground, staining the stone, but none adhered to the parchment. The scroll remained blank, its fibers rejecting the eternal mark. The scribes tried again, chanting incantations taught by priests who had died thousands of years before. Still, the ink refused, drying midair, crumbling to dust before their eyes. Fear overtook them, for ink was not supposed to fail. It was the blood of time, the unyielding current that carried every soul toward its shore. And yet here it was, evaporating at the very moment it sought to claim you. Some scribes whispered that your life was sealed in a covenant not made with them. Others said the well had been poisoned by an unknown hand. But beneath their arguments ran a deeper dread, the realization that fate itself had reached a boundary it could not cross. Anubis stood silent through their chaos. He did not command them to continue, nor did he rebuke their failure. His eyes watched as the last drop of ink turned to dust, scattering into the air like ash. For a long time, no one moved. The sound of the failing ink clung to them, a faint hiss that echoed like a warning. The scribes abandoned their tools, their hands trembling, their voices breaking in disbelief. Never before had they seen the language of endings stripped of its power. The scroll lay untouched, luminous in its defiance, as though it carried within itself a secret that not even the gods dared to write. And in that refusal, the hall itself seemed to shiver, as though something greater than destiny had just passed through its walls. Far beyond the known necropolises, buried beneath dunes that swallowed entire cities, there lies a tomb that no map records. The ancients called it the Forgotten Tomb, for it was not built for kings or queens, nor priests or generals. It was said to be carved for one soul alone, a chamber awaiting the arrival of a being whose fate even Anubis would not inscribe. Yet when the tomb was opened in secret centuries later, the sarcophagus was empty. Only the walls bore inscriptions, cryptic, broken phrases that seemed more like prophecy than remembrance. Those who entered swore they heard whispers, though no wind passed through the stone corridors. The sound came from deep within the sarcophagus itself, a hollow voice that did not belong to the living. It spoke not of endings, but of continuance, as though the occupant had never truly departed. The echo was unsettling, for it suggested that the tomb did not house death, but rather sheltered a mystery that outlived it. On the walls, faint hieroglyphs depicted a figure standing between the worlds, light radiating from their form. Yet the image was incomplete, faces blurred, symbols missing, as though time itself had conspired to conceal the truth. Among the fragments, one phrase stood out, etched with sharper lines than the rest. The one whom even the grave cannot hold. Scholars argued its meaning, yet the whisper in the tomb seemed to answer with a certainty that left them trembling. For in another age, another voice had spoken a similar truth. The stone was rolled away, and he was not there. The echo of Yeshua's resurrection, intertwined with the tomb's silence, a parallel that was impossible to dismiss. Could it be that the ancients, though strangers to his name, glimpsed the same defiance of death? The air within the chamber seemed to pulse with this unspoken connection, as though two eras had bent toward one another through the fracture of mortality. The explorers fled, sealing the tomb once more, but its whisper remained. It lingers still, carried on the desert winds, reminding all who dare to listen that death does not always claim its prey. Somewhere in that silence, a voice waits to be heard again, and when it rises, the tomb will no longer be forgotten. Beyond the tombs and the halls, deeper than the caverns where torches dare not burn, there is a gate known only in fragments of myth. It is said to be the threshold between the living and the realm of shadows, a door that opens only when Anubis himself commands. Yet, whispers speak of guardians stationed there, beings neither mortal nor divine, bound to the silence of eternity. They were not carved into temple walls, nor remembered in scrolls, for their existence was never meant to be known. They stand at the afterlife gate, watching, waiting. Legends claim these guardians were forged from the first breath of the desert wind, their forms shifting like sand, their eyes glowing like stars buried beneath the earth. Some say they were the ones who first taught Anubis the path between worlds, others that they predate even his rule. What is certain is that when he faltered with your scroll, their watchful gaze turned toward you. For the guardians of the gate did not merely protect passage, they discerned the order of destiny itself. When they beheld the unwritten date, a stir passed among them. The stillness that defined their being trembled, as though struck by a question for which they had no answer. They had seen souls begging for release, kings weighed down by their crowns, tyrants clutching to power as their hearts sank heavy on the scales. But never had they seen a soul that could not be marked. To them, you were not a traveler waiting for judgment. You were an anomaly, a breach in the gate they swore to guard. Some claim they whispered among themselves, voices like stone grinding beneath the earth. Others say they remained silent. Their decision carried not in words, but in the shifting of the air. For one thing was clear. The gate could not open for you, not then, not in the way it always had for others. You were not barred from entry, nor granted passage, but suspended in between, leaving the guardians to question their purpose. The afterlife. Gate still stands in shadow, its threshold unbroken, its guardians unmoving. Yet their gaze lingers, their silence unsettled. For they know that the one who cannot be measured will one day approach again, and when that day comes, the gate itself may tremble. In the deepest vaults of the underworld, where the dust of eternity clings to every stone, the scrolls of souls are said to be guarded not only by scribes, but by a serpent older than the desert itself. This serpent, coiled endlessly around the chamber, was no ordinary creature, but a manifestation of the boundary between life and death. Its scales shimmered like obsidian, eyes burning with an unceasing fire, and its breath was said to taste of the graves it had swallowed. It bore no name among men, for its existence was forbidden to be spoken aloud. When Anubis carried your scroll into the chamber, the serpent stirred. The coils that had lain motionless for ages shifted, shaking dust from the stone columns. It sensed what the scribes could not, the void where your death date should have been, the breach in the harmony of the order it guarded. Its eyes fixed upon the parchment, and for the first time it hissed not in anger, but in confusion. The scroll pulsed faintly in its presence, glowing as though resisting the weight of its gaze. The scribes who witnessed this moment fell to the ground in terror, for they knew the serpent did not move without reason, nor did it question what was placed before it. Yet here it was, trembling as though confronted by a mystery beyond its dominion. Some swore they heard it speak in a language of echoes, whispering that the parchment bore a seal unseen, a mark that even it could not consume. And within that whisper arose an echo from another time, another story. For once, in a different tomb, a stone was rolled away, and death itself recoiled. Yeshua's triumph over the grave had shaken the foundation of mortality, and now the serpent, bound to guard the law of endings, felt that same tremor. It recognized in your scroll the resonance of a defiance older than Egypt, a light that darkness could not fully devour. The serpent recoiled into silence, but its coils no longer lay at rest. They shifted restlessly, as though awaiting the return of that which unsettled it. The guardians feared what this meant, for if the serpent stirred again, the chamber would not hold, and the scrolls of countless souls would be exposed. Still, your parchment glowed, untouched, defying both guardian and god. Legends speak of signs carried upon the flesh and spirit of those who were touched by eternity. Some marks were faint, hidden in the skin like birthmarks shaped with purpose. Others burned within the soul, invisible to eyes yet felt by every shadow that dared to approach. The ancients feared such marks, for they revealed a bond not to years or ages, but to the very rhythm of time itself. You carry such a mark, one that cannot fade, one that even the sandstorms of centuries could never erase. It is said the mark first appeared when Anubis refused to inscribe your death date. Though no ink touched the scroll, a symbol bloomed upon you, a flame written without fire, an imprint not drawn by mortal hand. The priests who glimpsed it were overcome with dread, for they understood that this sign was not merely decoration. It was a declaration, a reminder that your existence stretched beyond their reckonings, that the cycle of birth and death could not contain what you were meant to become. The mark itself was unlike any seen before. Some described it as a serpent devouring its own tail, others as an eye that never blinked, and still others as a spiral drawing endlessly inward, yet reaching outward at once. Each interpretation told less about the mark and more about the fear it provoked, for the truth of it lay beyond comprehension, shifting, refusing to settle into one form. Like your destiny, it resisted definition. Those who studied it too closely often fell into visions. They claimed to see deserts swallowed by oceans, stars collapsing into themselves, and the hourglass of existence shattering into dust. Yet amid these visions, one certainty emerged. The mark was not a warning of death, but a seal of endurance. It testified that you had outlived not just moments, but entire measures of time, walking through doors that others never even saw. The gods themselves grew uneasy, for marks were their language, the way they branded chosen kings and cursed enemies. But yours bore no trace of their hand. It was neither blessing nor curse, but something entirely other. And in that otherness, they found their fear. For if you carried the mark of one who outlived time, then time itself must one day answer to you. There comes a moment when even the gods run out of numbers. Anubis, who had recorded the destinies of countless generations, approached the end of your scroll again and again, yet each time his hand faltered. He searched the sands of eternity for the hour meant to claim you, but none revealed itself. The river of time flowed, carrying kings to their graves and shepherds to the silence of dust. Yet for you, it circled endlessly, never reaching a shore. The final hour refused to be born. The chamber grew restless. Torches sputtered, shadows twisted upon the walls, and the very air quivered, as if waiting for the declaration that never came. The scribes lowered their pens, unwilling to attempt what their master would not. The serpent stirred in its coils, the guardians at the gate leaned forward, but still no hour was inscribed. The universe itself seemed to pause, asking the same question Anubis could not answer. How can one measure the end of what was never meant to end? In that silence, a memory arose from beyond the Nile, beyond the desert, beyond the reach of Egypt's gods. It was the voice of Yeshua, who once stood at a tomb and declared, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last." Those words echoed like thunder in the underworld, shaking the very foundation of the chamber. If he was the beginning and the end, then what place was there for another ending to be written? The scroll in Anubis's hands seemed to shine with that same defiance, a refusal to bow to the ink of mortality. Anubis lowered the pen once more. His golden eyes lingered on your name, knowing that to write a number upon it would be to deny what eternity itself had spoken. The final hour remained hidden, not lost, not delayed, but beyond reach. The gods did not argue, for even they sensed a greater hand at work, one that penned destinies beyond their grasp. And so the scroll was left unfinished, sealed not by ink, but by silence. Yet silence is never the end. It is a door left ajar. Somewhere beyond the reach of the jackal god's hand, the hour still waits, uncounted, trembling at the edge of revelation.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.